Good evening and welcome to Metro Focus. I'm Jack Ford. Breaking news, political battles, world-changing events. The job of holding a mirror up to those events and reporting on them is at the heart of journalism. And one man who has been at the forefront of the industry is 60 Minutes correspondent and veteran journalist Scott Pelley. From risking his life running toward Ground Zero in New York City on 9/11 to reporting on the front lines of Iraq and Afghanistan, for 45 years, Scott Pelley has given the public a crucial look into contemporary life across the globe. Now he's sharing his experiences following these major stories and the people involved and affected by them in his new book titled Truth Worth Telling, a reporter's search for meaning in the stories of our times. And I'm delighted to have a former colleague and friend, Scott Pelley, joining us here today. Always good to see you.
Jack, great to be with you on Metro Focus. Thank you.
It's good. Usually in the past, you've been interviewing me, so I now get a chance to ask you some of these wonderful questions. I'm going to start off with the fact that it's a marvelous book.
Well, thank you.
And it's a marvelous look inside of stories and the notion that, and you know this from 60 Minutes, the best stories focus on the people who are at the center of them. So you read this, and I think the best reaction, perhaps the one you're looking for, is you say to yourself, I didn't know that. I didn't know those stories. I didn't know the background, the details of that. So congratulations to doing that. Now let me talk about the book itself and the structure of the book. It's sort of trumpeted as a memoir, but memoirs traditionally, the author says, this is who I am. Here's where I was born, here's what I did, here's my first job, my second job, and that's fine. This is not really that. Why did you decide not to do a more traditional memoir and talk about the approach you decided to take?
Well, Jack, I wanted to write a memoir, but I didn't want to write a memoir about me. I didn't think anybody would care about that. But it had occurred to me that I had met some of the most interesting people in the world who had discovered the meaning of their lives during some of the most difficult moments in our recent history. And they were very interesting people. So I decided to organize the book according to values and virtues. Each chapter has a title, for example, gallantry, selflessness, valor, duty, and there's stories about the individual people or groups of people that exhibited that value during historic moments. For example, the first chapter is entitled Gallantry, and it's about the members of the FDNY, the fire department of the city of New York, that I saw at Ground Zero on 9/11.
You mentioned in looking at that story, you talk about the fact, and we've heard so many of their stories, and many of us know people who lost their lives in there, fire department people. As you always say about the true heroes, the fire people, the police people, the emergency services, they run in the direction of danger when the rest of us are running away. And I was struck by you talking about the fact that they didn't even really know what they were going into, and yet it never kept them from actually going into that. Talk a little bit about what that said to you in terms of the value of their lives and their sacrifices.
Well, I watched so many firemen go into the towers against just the chance that they might be able to save someone. And in doing the research for the book, I found many radio transcripts, 911 telephone call transcripts, et cetera, that paint the picture of what was happening in the building. The gallant fight to climb the stairs and to try to put out the fire in the stairwells to clear a path for the people above the point of impact to be able to come down. And so when I saw those firemen rushing into the building, knowing what the risks were, they didn't know that the building would collapse. One of the things that I learned in all of my research was that no steel tower had ever collapsed due to fire in the history of the world. So the chiefs, Chief Gansey and his deputy chiefs, were down there at the command center, not expecting the buildings to fall down. And yet they sent those men into the buildings to find those people who they might be able to save. So many stories of gallantry from within the buildings themselves. It occurred to me, Jack, that when the firemen went into those buildings, they didn't know what 9/11 was about. They didn't know who attacked us, but it didn't matter because they knew what they were about. Each and every one of them had sworn an oath years or decades before to protect the people of the city of New York and had decided back then what they would do on that day. And as you recall, 343 members of the FDNY were lost on that morning, the largest loss of life of any emergency service in world history in a single event. And if this book does anything at all, Jack, I just hope it pays adequate tribute to that sacrifice.
You do get a sense of the value of their lives. Let me come back to something that you mentioned, and that was the chapters and how you decided to break them down. And you said there are qualities here. Most of them are exemplary, and you mentioned gallantry, selflessness. But there are a couple of chapters in here that talk about deceit and hubris and arrogance. First question, why break it down that way? And then give me a sense of some of the sort of general characteristics and categories and who populated in the book those different categories.
Jack, when I was anchoring the CBS Evening News a few years ago, I was there during the ISIS attack that killed 120 people in Paris. And I noticed all these people coming to this makeshift memorial they'd set up on the street there, children, men and women carrying candles and laying them down on the cobblestone street. And I looked in their faces, and there was this look of bewilderment, like, well, you know, what's life all about if this kind of thing can happen? And it occurred to me at that moment that I'd seen those people before, that I'd seen them at the World Trade Center on 9/11. I'd seen them in Oklahoma City when the Murrah Federal Building had been bombed. This look of what is the meaning of life? And I thought in that moment, maybe we're asking the wrong question. Don't ask the meaning of life. Life is asking, what's the meaning of you? And so that animates the entire book on the side of the angels and on the other side that you were just describing, how character is destiny, how values matter. And so I wanted to examine some of the people that I'd known and met in my career on the side of the angels, and also some others, too often politicians, who exhibited traits of deceit and hubris, and where that led them on their paths.
And you're very honest about your assessments here. You know, clearly the exemplary characteristics, you can tell those stories. There are people who are truly heroes. You know, we often say that the best definition now, we understand heroes are ordinary people who, when confronted with extraordinary circumstances or the great crises of their lives, find themselves capable of doing extraordinary things.
Exactly.
And I think so many of those stories are in your book. But when you look at deceit, and you look at hubris, and you look at arrogance, you're very honest about your assessments. I mean, you're looking at this, and nobody's using a boxing analogy. You're not pulling punches at all.
Well, we're in the honesty business, aren't we, in journalism?
We should be. We'll continue that conversation at some point. We would like to think we all are.
For example, the chapter entitled Deceit is about President Clinton and the time that I was chief White House correspondent for CBS News, and the Monica Lewinsky matter broke, and then the impeachment of the president occurred and the trials in the Senate. The chapter entitled Hubris is about the 2016 election. And it applies, I think, to both candidates, to both Secretary Clinton and Donald Trump in those days, and where that led them in their pursuit for the presidency. So not all of the people I've met in my career, like you, are heroes. And so I think there's a lot to learn from the tragic characters as well.
Let me ask you this about your pursuit of these stories and the writing of the book. As you know from the great work you've done over the years at 60 Minutes, I was fortunate enough, had great good fortune to do some stories for 60 Minutes Sports. So I know how talented the staff is and how devoted everybody is to the pursuit of good journalism. But one of the things I think you probably agree with me is that you start off with a story and you have an idea of where that story is going to go. But sometimes when you get there, you found something completely different from what you thought you were going to find, where you thought you were going to go. So you started off with an idea to do this book. Once you finished it, did you find that it had taken you someplace that you maybe hadn't anticipated this journey was going to take you?
You know, Jack, that's a great question, and the answer is it took me to a lot of places I didn't anticipate. One of the interesting things about being an eyewitness to historic events is that you don't know very much. All you know is what you saw.
People might find that surprising for you to say that, because they might think, well, you're the one who has to know.
Well, let me give you an example. I'm down on West Street when World Trade Center #1 collapses in front of me. And so I witness that event, but I don't know why it collapsed. I don't know what the firefighting strategy was. I don't know where the firemen were or what their orders were and what was going on inside that building. But in the intervening years, I've been able to gather an enormous trove of records of various kinds. The National Institutes for Standards and Technology, for example, did 53 engineering studies on why the buildings collapsed. And I went through all of those. I went through all the radio frequency transcripts of the FDNY and the Port Authority Police and the NYPD. I went through all the 911 calls that came out of the buildings. And in putting all of that together, now in this book, I'm able to inform what it was I saw with my own eyes and make sense of what I saw. So in that regard, I learned a lot of things that were surprising to me. And in going through the other chapters in the book, even though I was an eyewitness to these historic events, it wasn't until I'd written the book and done the research that I fully understood them.
It is a marvelous look at this, as you say in the title, the stories of our times, and this reflection on what they all mean and what our lives should mean to ourselves as we're dealing with these things. Not surprising, given the quality of your work over the years, that it's a wonderful book, and I think anybody will enjoy reading this. Scott, just great work, and a pleasure having you here with us.
Jack, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.